It's a historically hideous season.
It's our 100th ugly house.
And if these walls could talk...
Do you cry a lot?
I do.
Ugliest House in America season premiere Wednesday at 8 on HGTV.
You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
Corn is neither the solution nor the problem. In episode 27, the corn episode, we introduced the idea of corn on the landscape and that it was not the ultimate answer to all your problems. The duck migration dilemma does not have a silver bullet. It certainly is not corn. Corn is not the silver bullet answer to it all. It is not the answer to your duck shooting needs, and it is not the answer to why you are not shooting ducks. Sorry, kids. The answer is never as easy as that. But today, following up on part 2.1 of the corn episode, we are doing the corn episode 2.2. We're joined by Mike Oropallo, partner with Barclay Damon. Mike is a recognized wildlife law attorney representing clients on ultra niche issues such as the transfer, importation, and permitting of wildlife. Mike regularly represents museums with the acquisition of natural history specimens and counsels clients on the labyrinth, I like that, labyrinth of wildlife laws and prohibitions, including pursuant to the Endangered Species Act, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, some of you will have heard of this, called CITES, and the Lacey Act, which I would say started a lot of this. Mike also is a passionate waterfowl and big game hunter that travels the U.S. and world in pursuit of game. But I don't want to over-represent Mike here because I might get myself into some legal trouble. So, Mike, welcome to the Foul Weather Podcast.
Thanks, Mike. I'm really honored to be here and appreciate it. As Mike said, I'm a partner with Barclay Damon. I give you the shameless plug disclaimer that our lawyers at the firm want me to say, and that is the statements that I make today are my own opinions on educating you about wildlife laws, but it is not legal advice, so don't rely on it, please. With that said, as Mike said, I've been doing this for about 40 years, and together with Barclay Damon's outdoor and wildlife practice and Rick Capozza, another friend of Mike's, and I have created this, one of the only legal departments in the country that specializes in outdoor and wildlife. And I was lucky enough to be appointed to go to the CITES Convention of the Parties, Conference of the Parties in Uzbekistan about a month ago, where they set international wildlife policy. So not only am I a passionate hunter, and not only am I passionate about wildlife laws, but I am actively involved as a board member of Pope and Young, a board member of Dallas Safari Club, and involved in a lot of voluntary activities for our sport and everyone else. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, that's an excellent resume, Mike. And so, but you obviously are a hunter, right? So we'll dig into that stuff and then kind of legal stuff. I do want to say that you're a little lucky. You're in Florida. It sounded like you had a little trouble getting down there, but we at the farm here in Jack's Reef at the home office just got it was over my boots snow last night, and it's still coming down. I bet you we're going to have 20 inches of snow on the ground. But in the thaw yesterday, my wife and I were able to Mike and I were talking about before this, we were able to shoot our black duck limits and pick up a few mallards. But Mike, nice. You had a lot of people complained about how dry the duck hunting season was in New York this year. And I know you hunt northern New York a bit. How was that? How did that look this year for y'all?
The early season, with your wood ducks and teal was pretty good. I would have to say that, there was probably more teal around than I normally see, but the wood duck hunt was pretty good. And, unfortunately, because I was involved with work, I was not able to do a lot in the mid-season. But Barclay David, we do host a number of hunts for clients and friends of the firm. And they did pretty well in both, the cornfields, for mallards and blacks. And then later on the water, there were actually more bluebills around this year than we've seen in a long time. And I did get a chance to hunt out in the Midwest in Illinois for a day, and there was a lot of waterfowl out there. I caught it perfectly with a couple days before on a cold front.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it sounds like you had a better season than me. I think, like my wife and I said, we're driving back from hunting yesterday. Dog was tired in the back of the truck sleeping, and I'm like, it's amazing how one duck hunt might be able to save a season for you because we were pretty miserable with the drought, and then it got cold early, and most of our spots iced up fast. We worked more on the deer and the pheasants, I think, this year. But you said, and I have hunted with y'all up there in a cornfield, I think, once. So you said corn, since that's the focus of this episode a little bit. Those are cut cornfields, kind of cut farm fields that you guys are hunting for geese and ducks mostly up there, right?
Some wet areas, sheet water in places.
Yeah, they look like messy fields. That's what I like. They're kind of like wet soils and old equipment. Those are always what I look for. If I can find a guy with a combine that looks like it came out of the 70s and 80s, and then he's trying to train his kid how to drive the thing, you kind of be in luck, because that falls under, and we'll get into it, normal agricultural practices. It's just bad equipment and bad drivers. So, but you were also, so this Uzbekistan thing was not a hunting trip, right?
No. Every 3 years, all the countries of the world get together, and basically to set international wildlife policy. It's similar to the Endangered Species Act, but it's not quite the same. But CITES applies if you are going to hunt worldwide and you're importing something into the U.S. and it's covered under CITES Appendix 1, 2, or 3. You have to have a permit or a certificate of origin before you can bring that back into the U.S. But so the CITES Conference of the Parties goes through all the proposals over the course of the last 3 years and determines whether or not there should be an uplisting, downlisting, or various other aspects.
Gotcha. Fascinating stuff, Mike. But as we were setting up this interview, all I got was a text from you that said Spain, and you had a bow and some big horn-looking critter in front of you. So give us a little, because that's your big game bug that you have, and especially with a bow. So just give me, and I guess the listeners, a rundown, because I want to know what the heck that animal was. And I mean, hunting in Spain for big game animals, not a thing I've heard of a lot.
Actually, it's pretty big. Spain has a lot of big game hunting, and Spain is a wonderful country. I mean, the food, the wine, just the people, it's fantastic. But I was lucky enough to go over to hunt Bisete ibex. There's 4 different species of ibex, which is really, they got these funky horns that go back, and they're a mountain goat is what they are. So you're not hunting them on the flooded corn. You're hunting them on the tops of mountains. And a guy like me, 66 years old, climbing those mountains is not an easy thing, let alone getting within bow range of these wily creatures, but I was lucky enough to get it done, and lucky enough to get within 45 yards of a nice Bisete ibex. Air is my photograph that I sent to you.
Yeah, and you said it was a beautiful animal, and you said too, like, you regularly practice out to 60 yards with your bow.
Yeah, I do. I don't like to, I actually regularly practice out to 80, but I don't like to shoot at anything over 50. It's like anything else, you've got to practice. And, sometimes the farther out, the more relaxed the animal can be. So it actually can be more humane, but still a lot of things can go wrong at that distance. So like anyone else, I like that 15 to 20 yard shot, but I need to be prepared for those 40 and 50 yard shots, especially for, mountain animals and things to that effect.
For sure, yeah, because you don't want them to go too far or go off a cliff or anything like that if you can help it. But So the chest cavity on that, is it kind of like an elk, or is it even bigger? Like you've got a pretty big vital area to hit too, don't you, Mike?
Actually not.
Oh, okay.
It's not a big animal. I mean, it's like a sheep or a mountain goat, North American sheep or mountain goat. So,
Okay.
I would say, probably a 180-pound animal, something to that effect. So it's a pretty good vital area, like a white-tailed deer, or not, but not as big as an elk, but challenging, put it that way.
Yeah, I guess I should stay in my lane and talk about birds. So, uh, one of these days, I'll chase other stuff out west and maybe in another country. But
Absolutely.
a little more on kind of your role with Barclay Damon, and maybe speak to kind of like 1,000-foot level of Barclay Damon, Migratory Bird Treaty Act cases in general, the type of stuff that you in general have handled, over the years. And I'm guessing this is you're a defense lawyer on this stuff, right? So.
Well, it's both a defense lawyer on people that get in trouble, but it's also proactively, I represent some duck clubs and things to that effect they want to know what the law is, and it can be everything from baiting. It can be, tagging requirements. A lot of people don't realize, that once you leave the field, you need to make sure that those items are tagged. And, the classic example is that, yeah, you're hunting with your buddies and everybody throws the birds in the back of your truck, and you go driving down the road and all of a sudden you've got 4 times the limit in the back of your truck, and a conservation officer stops you and says, hey, you're over the limit. And you go, my buddies are right behind me. That doesn't really cut it. If they want to be sticklers, those birds should all be tagged. And, a lot of gun clubs and things like that constitute what's called a migratory bird preservation facility, where they are allowed to, to clean the birds and things to that effect. And the definition of possession comes into play with that. So, but from the defense standpoint, yes, we get calls, and we ended up having to represent people that are charged with various violations of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, everything from not having a duck stamp to having too many shells in the gun to baiting allegations. And, those baiting allegations can come anywhere from, a sting operation on hunters that through word of mouth that says somebody is hunting with a pile of corn in front of their blinds, to just a simple stop by a conservation officer that's checking licenses and plugs, and all of a sudden looks out in the decoys and there's a pile of corn out there. So it can happen a lot of different ways. And I'm talking about extreme examples, obviously.
For sure. So then let's dive right into what does constitute baiting under Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And then there's a lot of, I guess, confusion about the 1998, and I'm going to start saying MBTA because I'm getting tired of saying Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So
perfect.
The 1998 MBTA Reform Act, there's some confusion about that because there's folks out there that basically say that is the point at which it became legal to hunt over standing crops, right? And the contention is the standing corn stuff. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you answer it. Is that true that the 1998 MBTA Reform Act all of a sudden allowed hunting over standing crops?
No. The 1998 amendment to the Act, and I'll call it the Act, really had to do with the intent requirement. In 1990, up until 1998, the baiting violations under the Act were what's called strict liability. In other words, if you're hunting a field and somebody says, oh, that field was baited, you're liable. You were violating the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, whereas once 1998 came around, and it was as a result of some court decisions, some egregious court decisions where people were charged with felonies for not knowing that a field was baited, but showing that it was baited by someone. And it became what's called a scienter crime. Or misdemeanor, whereas it used to be you're guilty no matter what because you hunted that field. Now it's that you knew or should have known that the field was baited. What does that mean? we'll get that into that a little bit later, but you've got the same egregious example. Oh, you walk out into the field with your buddy or your guide, and there's a giant pile of corn sitting next to the mailer decoys. Well, that's you kind of know that that's baiting.
Right.
And you knew or should have known, and you could be liable for that. The 1998 Act amendments also made it a specific crime for somebody to knowingly bait. So, in other words, if someone goes out and baits, to whether it's a hunting guide or a friend or whatever, they're more liable, and the penalties are a lot more stronger, when it comes to somebody like that, as opposed to a hunter that just happens to go out there and is not looking with a magnifying glass to see that there's, 27 kernels of corn in a square yard area.
Right, and this type of stuff actually happens quite a bit. I mean, there was a blind in Tennessee. I'm not even going to get into it, but I know a blind in Tennessee was closed. There's people dropping corn on public land sometimes, and blinds get closed for extended periods of time because of it. And, it's I think, short-sighted in general by folks. But now there is so 1998 was the act, the Reform Act, and then 1999 was the final rule. I don't know the difference between like the Reform Act and then the final rule. I guess there was some need for further clarification in that final rule in 1999, a language or something.
Sure. Let me back up a little bit in the difference between a law and a regulation.
For sure.
Okay. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act is a law. It's a statute that is enacted by Congress. Okay. Laws are enacted by Congress. Regulations, on the other hand, are put together by the agencies, in this particular case, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they are usually, Congress usually says regulations to be created by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to interpret the laws of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And they are enacted by, or I shouldn't say enacted by, they go into place by publication in the Federal Register,
Yep.
Public notice and comment, and then ultimately adoption. So the regulations are usually interpretive of the laws themselves. For example, baiting. It may just say it's unlawful to bait for waterfowl in the act itself, in the law itself. In the regulations, they say what is the bait, what constitutes baiting. And there's always gray areas in all of these different things. And that's why there's court cases that interpret or apply, these types of things. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so this 1999 final rule, and it's like 20.21, like letter I. So that's from the Federal Register then, correct?
It's actually in the Code of Federal Regulations. Okay. CFR. 50 CFR Part 20 governs migratory bird hunting. Okay. So it goes through that. If you ever want to look at the things, it's what tells you about duck stamps and plugs and things to that effect. It's a long provision. 50 CFR Part 20 is specific to duck hunting, but you've got 50 CFR Part 17 is the Endangered Species Act. So they got all the regulations involved in the Endangered Species Act. So if you look at this part 20.21 I believe, it is an interpretation or it's a regulation involving what constitutes baiting. Okay. And you talked about it before. There's a lot of uncertainty about, geez, can I hunt over flooded corn? Yeah, you can hunt over flooded corn. I mean, if you look back at the original act back in the 50s, maybe the early 60s, it specifically said you can hunt over standing corn, flooded standing corn. And so what this final rule, or which is now the regulation, it talks about, there is nothing in this paragraph to prohibit the taking of any migratory game birds, including waterfowl, because waterfowl is a type of migratory game bird, on or over the following lands or areas that are not otherwise baited. Okay. Remember, we talked about baiting the piles of corn and stuff like that. That's baiting. So as long as you don't have piles of corn all over there, it's perfectly legal to hunt over standing crops or flooded standing crops, including aquatics, and that's a whole nother story. Standing, flooded, or manipulated natural vegetation. And this comes into play if you've got sedges or things to that effect that's natural vegetation that you can actually manipulate. Flooded, harvested croplands. So in other words, they're harvested and then they're flooded. Or lands or areas where seeds or grains have been scattered solely as a result of normal agricultural planting, harvesting, post-manipulation. Okay, so what that means is two things. Okay, one is, or actually three things. One is that you can hunt over standing corn. Okay.
Yep.
We've all hunted where part of the field is harvested and you're standing in standing corn. That's perfectly legal. You can also do the same thing with standing corn that has been flooded, whether intentionally or otherwise. Perfectly legal to do. You can also hunt over harvested fields that have been flooded. That also is perfectly legal to do. What you cannot do is hunt over any of those areas that have been baited. Okay, and then we get to the issue of what constitutes baiting. Well, one thing that constitutes baiting that people don't realize or should realize is that some people say, okay, I'm going to take that standing corn, and before I flood it, I'm not going to harvest it with normal farming operations. I'm going to take a bush hog in there and I'm going to bush hog all that so that there's ears of corn and everything else, and then I'm going to flood it. Mm-hmm. No. That is manipulating corn, not in normal farming operations. And it's the cooperative extension of the USDA that interprets what is normal agricultural operations and normal farming operations. And so the third thing that I was talking about is standing corn, harvested standing corn, or harvested corn, grain. I use corn, but it could be any other types of grain.
Right.
But you get into the issue, and it mainly is with dove hunters, and there's no dove hunters. There's no season in New York State, but it's early in the season. So sometimes fields are planted and seeds are sowed onto those fields. Well, that's as long as it's part of normal farming, agricultural operations, you can hunt over those fields, even though those doves might be going for the seed that's planted. In fact, the farmers probably would prefer you to hunt over those fields
to keep them out of there, right? Yeah.
Don't eat the grain.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire an energy vampire. But also, they're a literal vampire. And suddenly, my team is spending all their time sharpening wooden stakes and buying bulk silver and rehearsing ancient chants, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant takes insights from over 1 billion professionals to create a short list of the best fits for you. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
So I really want to hit on the normal agricultural practices, though, because you went with like the scattering of seeds, because it says or lands or areas where seeds or grains have been scattered solely as a result of normal agricultural planting, harvesting, post-harvest manipulation, etc., right? But that is separate from the standing crops or flooded standing crops, right? So
yeah,
you can grow corn. This is an interpretation by people as they think it all has to be under normal agricultural practices, but there's ors and there's semicolons in this final rule paragraph. And so you can hunt over flooded standing crops. You can plant corn, you can flood it, and it doesn't really have to be part of a normal agricultural, what would be considered normal agricultural practice by USDA. That is kind of reserved for that, where seeds or grains have been scattered solely as a result of blah, blah, blah.
Well, that's where your baiting is. Okay.
Right.
It's the seeds or grain that's scattered that constitutes the baiting if it's not done through normal farming operations. So here's an example. Okay. I go and before I flood the cornfield at my duck hunting operation, there's standing corn, and I go into that standing corn and I harvest it through normal operations. And, there's a little bit of waste grain that happens as a result of that. and then I flood it. Absolutely, perfectly fine.
Fine. Yep.
Switch the issues around a little bit. I'm going through and I'm harvesting that same field, but you know what? I say to the farmer doing the combining, I say, you know what? Turn down the amount of grain, waste grain that is allowed as a result of it. You know, manipulate the combine to some extent so that now all of a sudden more corn is being sent out as waste corn. That's where it's not part of normal farming operations, agricultural operations. So it's an additional thing. Hunting over standing corn, flooded standing corn, fine. Hunting over harvested field, flooded harvested field, fine. So long as there's not all this grain that's out there that's not part of normal agricultural or farming operations. So it's an overlay.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love it. I appreciate the clarification there, Mike. And not in the script that I sent you, and I'm also not giving legal advice, but I read through there was some clarification in that in the 1998 Reform Act that was also millet. Speaking of Japanese millet, right? Like that you can actually you cannot manipulate any domestic crop, but if some of your millet reseeds itself, you can manipulate that because it's going to have natural vegetation with it, right? This is moist soil management that we do that's very robust, and you can put water under it, but the ducks don't seem to get to it till the spring, and you want to be able to have refuges and state lands and duck clubs and stuff be able to provide this nice habitat. So you want to kind of like mow like maybe 50% of it or roll it and then flood it. That's all legal. I think the other thing you can do is you can actually use like corn stalks to for your blinds, but you can't let any grains fall off of it. I wouldn't touch it myself because likely I've moved, you know, I've like gone out back and just like peeled a little bit of the husk off my corn just to look at it, and things are falling out of it, right? Like I don't want to get caught in that situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, two things there. Yeah, I mean that you put out. You are allowed, and it's specific in the regulations. You are allowed to use corn stalks as part of your blind camouflage. All right.
Yeah.
There also is a provision in the regulations that say if you're walking into your blind and you knock over a corn stalk and a ear of corn falls, that's fine as long as you're not going over there grabbing the corn and throwing the corn out into the decoys. You know, there's specifics to that. So I mean, and you know, we're splitting hairs pretty much here. Most conservation officers are not going to cite somebody for something like that. There can be exceptions out there, but most of the time, at least what I've seen in terms of baiting operations, there's somebody that knew what they were doing, or the allegations are that somebody knew what they were doing, and that there was a specific intent to do it. You know, but I have been involved in situations, you know, where you know, because you get some of these large duck clubs that, you know, they harvest, they have permanent blinds and they harvest, you know, the fields and things like that. And when you're harvesting around permanent blinds, you know, sometimes you are going back and forth with the combine, and, you know, there's an argument that has been made by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I think largely unsuccessfully, because again, intent has to come into play here. You know, that, oh, you're intentionally cross-cutting so that you get more corn that comes onto the ground as opposed to being harvested.
Yeah.
So you know, it's splitting hairs, but for the most part, again, unless there's excess grain as a result of you not using normal farming operations, you can clearly hunt over standing corn, flooded standing corn, harvested field, flooded harvested field, etc.
Yeah, as long as it never falls under that definition of baiting.
Right. And just to get back to your millet example, that's also specific in the regulations that says you cannot manipulate millet when it's part of a normal agricultural operation. If you're growing millet, you can't just cut that down, and you can leave it standing, but you can't manipulate it so that, it falls into the water or whatever, and you got millet floating all over the place. However, because you get areas of flooded areas in fields where the millet may repopulate the following year, you can manipulate that natural vegetation, because that's where the exception is. It's considered natural vegetation. And natural vegetation, you can manipulate. I mean, if you've got sedges and things like that, you can go in there and bush hog that and flood it, as long as it's natural vegetation.
Yeah, and one of the things I feel like we're floating around is the term intent here, right? And so,
Yeah.
There's a lot of folks, I think, I wouldn't say a lot of folks. There is a crowd of folks, mostly in the Deep South and the Mississippi Flyway, that feel like, ducks are being shortstopped by, and I'm going to just say specifically flooded corn. This goes into all kinds of crops. We flood all kinds of things. Purposefully for agricultural practices, purposefully for providing habitat on national wildlife refuges, state areas, hunting areas for private clubs. But we're talking flooded corn because that's the contentious one. So there's folks that really feel like these birds are being shortstopped by flooded corn, and they're asking to make, intentionally, this is intent, flooded corn for the purpose of hunting ducks illegal. Is there something problematic about this? I don't know if it's an interpretation of the MBTA or slippery slope, but
yeah, I mean,
what would it mean? I think, Mike, because it seems like very specifically there's an ethical problem or some I'm not getting mine problem, with flooded corn. But what does that cause legally that's a little mucky, I think, out there?
It's really a slippery slope. I'll get on my soapbox for a second here, and I do a lot of work with the outdoor industry on a volunteer basis, and you got too many battles that go on between bow hunters and gun hunters and duck hunters and upland bird hunters and stuff like. We're all hunters. We're all outdoorsmen and women and conservationists and things like that. Where is the slippery slope? Okay, if they were to outlaw you flooding your cornfield after harvesting or while it's up, where does that line? Where do you draw that line? If I'm a rice farmer and I have to flood my fields, does that mean I can't hunt those fields anymore? Because once I flooded them, are they banned from it? It's too, I call it dancing on the head of a pin, and then you get into interpretation and all of that stuff. And, let's face it. The reason that birds aren't going further south anymore, because it's not as cold as it used to be. And migration is triggered by cold weather. I mean, snow geese, for example, where do snow geese go? They follow the snow line. If the snow line is in Canada, they'll stay in Canada. If the snow line is in Maryland, they'll stay in Maryland. So it's a slippery slope when you start talking about ethical issues. There's the fight that always goes on. Well, you shouldn't hunt the roost areas for ducks or geese because that's going to disrupt the flyway to allow the birds to go into the cornfields where it's most ethical to hunt them in the cornfields, not over water. Those are debates that we can still have, and and hunters, how far should you shoot? All of these different things. That it's okay over a campfire to have those debates, but putting them into laws and regulations. Be careful what you wish for.
Well, and I love what you just said is around the campfire, because I missed the other day. I had a prior obligation with family and stuff, but you invited me to the man cave, which I'm guessing would have been some stiff adult beverages and maybe some cigars. And we could have, rambled on and debated and discussed these types of things civilly. But I feel like so many people now are doing it over social media, and they're saying things that they wouldn't say to somebody's face. And I think we've all just got to tone that down a little bit, try to sit with people, visit with people, even if it's at a distance, and have these because these are good conversations, lots of times to be had. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that there are more people out there that would rather see us not doing what we're doing in the hunting community than there are that partake in it and actually actively do it. And so we're a small community. And when you're at that table, you got to reach across that table, shake hands, and at the end of the day, be together in this stuff. And I don't want this to become, anything contentious. I don't think it is. I think it's really pretty straightforward. And, that slippery slope one, that's where I go with it. And I haven't seen all the different angles, language and stuff, Mike, that you have seen in your job. But I'm just taking one case locally, like, hey, if we made hunting over flooded crops illegal, well, then, we've got a field down the road from us. It's muck soil. You're familiar with it. And I think some folks, it's a big piece, like 5,000 acres. And they flood it in the winter and they hold water on it because the muck soil, when it's exposed to air, it breaks down, right? And that soil doesn't sustain itself as long. And so if a tree falls in a field and then there's a bunch of standing corn and the water floods into it, well, you wouldn't be able to hunt that, which seems pretty absurd to me. Right. Like, and there's so much, that's just one very specific case, but now just get rid of corn and just throw all other types of crops in there. Right. Yeah. And it all of a sudden becomes kind of, I think, an absurd comment to even think about just regulating even just one crop. I guess where I'm going is it ain't going to happen. So I've hunted flooded corn a bit, both naturally flooded, standing, and then intentionally flooded. And I've had some great hunts and some not so great hunts. I've done this on mostly public land, honestly. But have you had the chance to hunt this type of habitat a lot, Mike, or not really?
Oh, no, I have. I mean, I've been blessed to be able to hunt all over the country and all over the world, really. Hunted, ducks in South America and, around in Alaska and everything else. And, hunting flooded corn, sheet water is phenomenal. But it's like anything else. Would I rather hunt harlequins in Kodiak Island or canvasbacks, in the Midwest and the Great Lakes? It's like asking you to pick out and choose which is your favorite child. They're all great, but they're all difficult. I mean, you can be in the best place in the world, and if the weather is not cooperating, and if the birds aren't there, then you're pushing water uphill.
Yeah, well, my wife and I hunted a flooded field yesterday. It was mostly moist soil. It was not corn at all. And I tell you, we scratched out 6 ducks. We got our 4 black ducks, which was very nice. And we could have killed a few more black ducks. Yeah, I know. People on here out from Mississippi Flyway West are always jealous. I sent some pictures to some friends and they're like, you're just flaunting those black ducks, aren't you? And I'm like, well, it's all we got over here. So yeah, I am. But I tell you, they didn't want to work that well. We didn't see more than maybe 200, 300 birds would be really pushing it. And they're late season ducks. 90% of our Mallard's black ducks are south of us now, really. They're just concentrated where they're at. And we have actually flooded corn. There's a few clubs around us that do flood corn. And it's a brick of ice and has snow on it. And there's no ducks near it. Right. And so there is kind of this mid-latitude thing, I think, a little bit where ducks will walk around on corn a bit. But if you got traditional snows and in snow and ice pushed down the way it used to, those birds at some point just aren't going to eat it. What we see is like we got mourning doves, blue jays, some crows picking at that stuff right now. But we're really not seeing it. Winus Point Marsh Conservancy, Northwest Ohio, stays a little warmer than other folks, but it's been a cold winter. And they're just, they're froze right out. Their birds are gone. And that's a Winus Point Marsh Conservancy and Shooting Club doesn't really do flooded crops. They do a little bit of buckwheat, I think, but they're froze out, and their birds are gone. So I think there's a bunch of this that's weather. There is I'm going to admit there is a combination of weather and food resources to some extent. But I think the biggest thing with you, Mike, that we got to is the legalities of it. And that's really what I wanted to get a feel for and have the listeners get the real word from somebody that does this professionally, is a lawyer that works with, MBTA all the time. So really appreciate the insight. Just a wealth of information, Mike. So I first of all just want to thank you for that and clarifying. I think hopefully for a lot of folks on here, clarifying what is and is not allowable under MBTA. And again, I'm not providing legal advice either. So, right, like I want to make sure of that. So,
no, it's I really appreciate it, Mike, and honored to be here. And to the extent I can educate the public about these things and prevent them from getting into trouble, I really, want to place that along. If you ever need legal advice, Barclay Damon LLP is the law firm. You can look me up right on the website. But I hope you don't have to. And I hope you have great hunting out there. And Mike, same to you. Look forward to the next time we get together.
Really appreciate it, Mike. One last question, though, I always like to ask guests is, and this is a wide open one, if there's anything you could change about duck hunting to make it better, what would it be?
Oh, God. Duck hunting is already better, but I would say that it's really educating people about the opportunities that there are within the state of New York and within the United States itself. Unlike the expense that's associated with big game hunting, and I know you fellow duck hunters that there's a lot of expense with all the nifty decoys and things that we have, but it's really an inexpensive way to see, anything from the Great Lakes to the Finger Lakes to Long Island and things to that effect. We have an awful lot that we can do, and a lot of it's public. So if I was going to change anything, I would say, get more people out there and get to see what you can see and enjoy our great Mother Nature.
I love that, Mike. Most people go right to habitat or buy more duck stamps. And I like it's wonderful the way it is and get more people out there. A lot of folks complain about overcrowding and things like that, but I don't know. I've just avoided the crowds, find the little nooks and crannies, and I'd rather have more of us in this great fraternity and sorority. I think we say too, right? Of hunters, and if anything, challenge your federal and state agencies to provide better access and better quality as well for that. If there end up being more people, that's not a people problem. That's not a numbers problem. That's an access problem in a people management problem largely. So.
And stick together.
Yes.
Don't fight with your fellow sportsmen.
Yes. Yeah. I'm trying to do more of the kumbaya stuff here on the Foul Weather podcast. We do call BS when we see it from other folks. We're always going to do that, but it doesn't mean I'm against you. I just want to make sure people have the good information in their hands to make the best decisions for the ducks and duck hunting. So, Mike, stay warm. Only 40 degrees in Florida today, though. So. I think.
Yeah, it's a little chilly down here. I don't think I'm getting sympathy from anyone, though.
We're in the teens. I got to get those ducks out of the barn and hang them in the utility sink to thaw them out and get them cleaned up from yesterday. But stay warm and, safe travels wherever your next adventure takes you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Have a great day.
How many days have you had empty skies over the duck blind? Your property can be more with Wildlife Strategies. It is no secret that hiring a consultant, an expert in managing water, woods, and fields, an expert in duck food, an expert in hunting pressure management, hiring a consultant yields better habitat for the critters you chase. Less empty skies, more quality days of field, more smiles for miles with family and friends. If that's your game and goal, contact Ryan Delaney at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. The Farmland Group is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisal across Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana, Georgia, Tennessee, and growing. Contact them today at farmlg.com. Hey, I'm telling you, do not hesitate because these folks are busy buying, selling, and providing consulting and management strategies that build value into your portfolio on your land. So get in the queue today. Get on their radar. Get on their books. Man, Y'all won't be disappointed. Contact the Farmland Group today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. All right, on to the duck migration forecast for the week. We're going to start with some broad weather pattern news. After retreating last week, the snow line continues to remain relatively stable from northeast Montana across North Dakota and then following the southern border of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, with a little bit of covering halfway down Ohio and PA as we head towards the East Coast. But we will see a retreat of the snow line as warm comes to the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week, only to be followed by a quick-moving system on Thursday night into Saturday morning that could dump up to 10 inches of snow in northeast Nebraska, portions of Iowa and southern Minnesota, and lesser amounts as it kind of fizzles out, going towards the Great Lakes region of Wisconsin and Michigan. Most ducks, though, are south of these areas, so it's really unlikely to cause any major migration movements. In the longer term, though, there is a growing chance for a sudden stratospheric warming, or SSW, that would start around the beginning of next week and could last for a month, so into February. This would be good news for the prairie pothole region as the mid-continent gets cold, and holds that solid frost seal. But here's the deal. There's no indication, at least in the short term, of significant snowfall. But we do continue with the Foul Weather Podcast to expect a February-March snow event or ongoing snow events, one after another, to help recharge the prairie breeding ground. So look forward to that. We'll see if it happens. But let's start the duck migration forecast this week in the Pacific Flyway and move our way east, because at least some weather is coming to the upper portions of the West this coming week. We have some cold weather and precipitation throughout the week in Washington, Oregon, and some of the Intermountain region, which has the capacity to move mallards around locally for sure, and is predicted to move some early migrating ducks, those that might have stuck around like widgeon and pintails, farther south down the flyway into California. We do expect this to be a trickle migration all week for dabbling ducks other than mallards. So a good week if you are in California to give it a try, to have some fresh ducks in the area. Nothing great, but better than it's been. So get after it. As we move to the Central Flyway, we predict some mallard movement out of those remaining stronghold areas to the north, but nothing really substantial. At northern latitudes of the Central Flyway, shallow waters are really frozen, and the early dabbling ducks are gone, and the mallards are held up on moving and big water. So where the cold is going to happen, there are really not many ducks left to move south. Let's think about that. As we move into the mid-latitudes, we see strong moderation in temperatures pretty quickly, with Kansas hitting the mid-60s this week. And when we get to Oklahoma, we see mid-70s. So probably a tough week for much migration at all, but some small movements out of northern latitudes into mid-latitudes by mallards this coming week. Nothing more, just a trickle of those mallards maybe. The Mississippi Flyway is not much better, but watch those rains in the MAV or Mississippi Alluvial Valley on Thursday and Friday, because even with warm temperatures, a bit of wind and rain will get ducks shuffling around. But be careful out there, because it sounds like a rumble of thunder might be in the mix. So stay out of the lightning rod zones, folks. Be safe. Some places in northeast Arkansas may see up to an inch of rain in concentrated locations. Not sure exactly where this is all going to line up. Could be Tennessee, could be Kentucky, could be further south in Arkansas as well. But there's definitely a system moving through. So be ready for that, and be ready to take advantage of those ducks shuffling around. Based solely on declining temperatures and some continued shuffling down the flyway, early in the week could see some ducks leaving the mid-Missouri latitude for places farther south, but it's not going to be mallards. In addition, though, based on Great Lakes region cold, there is a chance for some mallard movement out of the mid-Ohio latitude and into Kentucky and Tennessee early in the week. Best bet for those areas is kind of Wednesday, right before the warm-up happens the next day. The Atlantic Flyway really feels like a lather, rinse, repeat mode with not much going on this week. That same system from the Mississippi Flyway moves northeast and drops minimal amounts of rain in Pennsylvania and maybe up into New York on late Friday and into Saturday. But really, the midweek warm-up makes everything tough. Warm and comfortable ducks don't need to move. The best is to watch for a weather day with rain and wind, which looks mostly like a Saturday event. So those of you on the mid-Atlantic, look for some movement of ducks for the coming week, but don't expect any major migration this week. The southern end of the flyway should expect a pretty dull week, probably a bigger lull than we've had all season. So maybe North Carolina, like southern North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, should be pretty slow. But folks, keep your eyes on that long term because the 15th of January on looks like a dandy for those of us east of the Rockies. I hope our friends in Louisiana are having fun this year because we've had better cold than many years past. We've had ice early and ice down into the MAV. I've heard a lot of good reports from the southern end of everything east of the Rockies. So keep after them, my friends. And hey, if you ain't shooting ducks, maybe you just suck at duck hunting. Oh, I'm just kidding, man. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time, 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.